I believe I told you the story before already, but it's appropriate that we repeat it, so I'm repeating it again. This is in the Igris, in the Friedrich Rebbe's letters, in the previous Rebbe's letters. There was a chassid by the name of Rabbi Isaac Homler, Yitzchak Isaac Halevi, Epstein Mehomel. He was a Gaon Oilam, he was an incredible Gaon. The previous Rebbe calls him Harav HaGaon HaAmiti Ish HaShkoilis, which meant to say Ish HaShkoilis Ish Asher Kol Boy. He was a complete human being with every mile. He's one of the greatest Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, one of the greatest Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. He was later a Chassid of the Mittler Rebbe, who was probably his own age, I'm imagining. And then later he's a Chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, who he was much older than the Tzemach Tzedek. And there's actually a story about this. When the Tzemach Tzedek was a little boy, he once saw the Tzemach Tzedek listening to a Maamar Chassidus. Tzemach Tzedek was 3. And he wondered, is it possible that such a young boy could understand the Maamar? And the Alter Rebbe interrupted in the middle of talking and said in Yiddish, hört, wirst noch wissen, als hört. He's listening, you yourself will one day discover that he was paying attention. Anyway, fast forward 35 years, the first Maamar Chassidus that Tzemach Tzedek said, which is Erev Shavuos Tav Kuf Peiches, was the very same Maamar that the Rebbe Eisel had heard 35 years before, when the Tzemach Tzedek was a boy of 3. And as the Tzemach Tzedek was saying the Maamar, now he was from the senior Chassidim, and it flashed in his memory, how could it be that he was so young and he understood the Maamar, and the Tzemach Tzedek stops and says, Feh, a young man soll mecheshe sein auf Kunsten. Feh, a young man should suspect me of doing tricks. The Tzemach Tzedek used to call miracles a Kunst. Was soll ich tun an der Seide, bei mir gewesen und mir geheißen Chaser in dem Maamar. The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, came to me and said I should Chaser this Maamar. This is Rabbi Isaac. He was from the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, from the Chashuvim. By the Mittler Rebbe, he was even more so. By the Tzemach Tzedek, he was the Skenim, from the senior Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek. And there was an incredible kirv al-vavas between him and the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. I'll just share another little detail, just because it's interesting. It's irrelevant, but interesting. He passed away Tafresh Yud Zayin, which is about a decade before the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek passed away probably at 77. He was probably over 90 when he died. I'm just assuming that he had a bracha from Alten Rebbe Farichas Yomim, which was between 90 and 100 years, but I don't know this for sure. So his last trip to Lubavitch, he was an elder chassid, and the Tzemach Tzedek went out to be malava him, to accompany him. And they did something very interesting. They placed their head on each other's shoulder. That means that they were facing each other. Rabbi Isaac put his head on the Tzemach Tzedek's, let's say, left shoulder, and the Tzemach Tzedek put his head on Rabbi Isaac's left shoulder, and they stood like this for a meshach zman, in an embrace or in a meditation. And then when they picked up their heads, I think that Tzemach Tzedek said, Ey Mashiach vet nish kommen, wer weiß, mir wird sich noch sehen. If Mashiach doesn't come, who knows if we'll ever meet each other again. And that was their last time they met. So understand that Rabbi Eisel was a chassid, that Tzemach Tzedek was a rebbe, but Rabbi Eisel was a godel. And therefore he was obviously a big chassid. That means to say a bigger mekusher. In any case, there was a yid by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Ruzhiner, Yisrael Friedman, the Heilige Ruzhiner Rebbe, whom the Tzemach Tzedek never physically saw, pardon me, and yet between the Tzemach Tzedek and the Ruzhiner there was an incredible closeness. The Ruzhiner was 7 years younger than the Tzemach Tzedek, but he only lived 54, which meant that he passed away a full 15 years before the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek and the Ruzhiner never met, but there was correspondence on a physical level, on a spiritual level. There's a story once that a chassid traveled from the Rebbe Lubavitch, from Tzemach Tzedek and Lubavitch to the Heilige Ruzhiner for Bakoshes Eitzah, to get from him a counsel about dealing with a certain question. And the Ruzhiner said, "Me will sagen a paar Kapitel Achtilim, wird werden lichtig für die Augen, werden wissen, was man soll sagen." He says, I'll say a few Kapitel Achtilim, my eyes will begin to shine, will have clarity, and I'll know what to say. Anyway, getting to the point, Rabbi Isaac Homler was sent by the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek to Ruzhin, or maybe it was to Sadeger, on a shlichus, on some kind of a mission, whether it was to get counsel, or to get a bracha, or to send regards. I don't know what it was, but he spent Shabbos in Rishon. Now, if Rabbi Isaac Homler was older than the Tzemach Tzedek, probably by 20 years. So he was older than the Rishon Rebbe by 25 years, 26, 27 years. But Rabbi Isaac understood that he's an old chassid and the Rishon is a Hilike Tzedek, a Hilike Rebbe. A Ur Einuk from the Mishneh Magid, a Godel Shebegdelim. So he made it his business to be mistakel, to pay close attention to every little detail of the conduct of the Hilike Rishon Rebbe, the Hanhag of the Rishon Rebbe. And when he came back to Lubavitch, he repeated some of the stories that he saw during that one Shabbos. And the previous Rebbe, in his Igros Kodesh, repeats several of the observations that he made during that visit to Rishon. And one of them was the following. It was Friday afternoon, and the Hilike Rishon had gerechet alulke. He was smoking a pipe. In those days, the pipe was a long, long earthenware pipe that would sit on the base of it, would sit on the ground, and it was attached to your mouth. And he was smoking. And it was close to Shabbos. I don't know how close to Shabbos it was. The shamesh, or the gabbai, came in with a little hammer, with a gavel. He gave him a clap and tish. He banged on the table and he said, Shabbos. Now, Rabbi Eisel's looking at the Rishon. And Rabbi Eisel had an Einyan haboichen. He was a maven. He was an expert. And Rabbi Eisel described the following. The pipe fell out of his mouth. Not he spit it out of his mouth. It fell out of his mouth. And he continued, and I could see physically, actually, how he ascended upward and we remained where we were standing. In other words, he was in the presence of a tzaddik, Gomer, a Isha Lechem Kodesh, and he witnessed what happens to a tzaddik on Shabbos. Shabbos came and the Rishon was uplifted. He remained where he was and the Hilike Rishon was lifted up to a higher madrega. It says in Kabbalah, and it's explained in Chassidus, that Shabbos, there's a concept called Aliyas Ha'elamis. The worlds have an ascent. The worlds rise up. This ascent of the worlds is called technically that Kivei Shavas Mekol Malachte Ashabara Lechem. Hashem stops creating the world on a level of Asiyah. And of course we know that by the Eibishter there is no such thing as Asiyah. And we therefore say, Diburish ala Kadosh Baruch Hu Chashiv Maiseh. The idea that the Eibishter creates the world is called through speech. And on Shabbos, Hashem stops to speak. No, if Hashem stops to speak, so why doesn't the world stop existing? It should disappear. And parenthetically, tangentially, the Alter Rebbe, in the very last lines of the entire Sefer Tanya Kadisha, says that on Shabbos, you also have an Isser of Memtzei Chefzach Avadah B'Davar. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to have speech like you speak during the week, because since Hashem stops speaking in creation, on a level of chayil, a person has to also be much more careful with his words. On Shabbos, the Rebbe would often bring a Yerushalmi, B'kushihi da b'divrei Teira b'Shabbos. There's a whole question whether you're allowed to speak even words of Teira on Shabbos, because on Shabbos the Eibishter doesn't speak. So getting back to the original question, if on Shabbos the Eibishter doesn't speak, how does the world exist? And the answer is the world exists on a level of machshava. The Eibishter creates the world on a level of thought. Now what's the difference between speech and thought? So you know this from Tanya and other places, that when a person speaks, the words that he says are separate from him. On the other hand, when a person thinks, the thoughts are one with the person. And the nimshal is that during the week, the world is created in such a way that it should be separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And on Shabbos, the world is created in such a way that it's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why it says in Sfarim, it says in Chassidus, that v'lei peri Shabbatchem, that on Shabbos there's no klipa. That's why in Shabbos mitzvah la'angoy, and Shabbos you eat food and it's considered einik Shabbos, it's considered pleasure, and so on. And we don't talk about the skafia on Shabbos, not allowing yourself indulgences. To the contrary, on Shabbos we say that with einik Shabbos you're allowed to enjoy the physical pleasures, but on Shabbos physical pleasures are also holy. And by the way, I'm a fabring choin. You know, everybody knows the word an oxen ashtraimel. An ox, the Rebbe said it many times by fabringen. And the story of an ox nashtraimel is that there was a Yid sitting by the Baal Shem Tov eating cholent. Eating cholent. And the Baal Shem Tov called together the Chavraya Kadisha, and they made a circle, and they touched their hands and their shoulders. This was something that Baal Shem Tov would do often. And the Baal Shem Tov told them to close their eyes, and they saw an ox, a cow, eating cholent. So the Rebbe would often tell the story to bring out the point that a person can eat cholent and he can become the cholent. But if you look at Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, which is the source of the story originally, and the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov is considered a very reliable sefer. The Alter Rebbe looked it over. It was published by the Maltam Zachosid, and the Rebbe, I think, has letters that the Alter Rebbe gave a haskama on the sefer. The story of the ox and Ashtraimel is not told the way we hear it. We always hear ox and Ashtraimel as a disparaging the tale, that he was so into his food that he became the food. But in the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, the original Faket, the Baal Shem Tov was showing them what means Einik Shabbos. That he's enjoying the food so much that he's become the food Lemal Yuseh, because on Shabbos, a mitzvah liangay. So on Shabbos, there's no klipa. You enjoy your food, you enjoy all kinds of things, and so on. Now, of course, in Chabad, we were never into this. There's a famous comment made by the Alter Rebbe's youngest son, whose name was Reb Moshe. Alter Rebbe had 3 sons. And the youngest of the Alter Rebbe's sons was Reb Moshe, who, according to a Reshima from Friedrich and Rebbe, which is printed in Nigris, he had Gvaldik Arichas Yamim, may have lived as much as 90 years, maybe even longer. And he was a Nister. He was a Tzaddik Nister. And there's a story about his being a Nister also. And there were people who knew him in his senior years, in his later years. And he would eat bread and water. He would fast a lot, ate bread and water. He was a Giber, very strong man. Even Shabbos, he ate bread and water. So people said to him, Shabbos is a mitzvah la'ange, you're supposed to have wine and you're supposed to have meat. How come you're eating only bread and water? So he would answer, which means I have a Kabbalah, a tradition from my father, that any mitzvah from which the body has pleasure, one must not be particular about, implying that even though it's Taka Emes, it is a concept of Einik Shabbos, but you're allowed to be Mekel in Einik Shabbos, because in quotes, it's a mitzvah no, the body enjoys. But nevertheless, the truth of the matter is that Shabbos is holy, Shabbos is Kodesh, and the holiness of Shabbos is such that we say the whole world is in a state of holiness, including food and drink and sleep. And therefore on Shabbos, we indulge in pleasures. Mitzvah la'anga, it's called Einik Shabbos. Because the world is on a level of godliness, holiness. So there's an interesting story that the Rebbe was sitting upstairs by the table of the Friedrich Rebbe. After the Friedrich Rebbe passed away, as you know, for the next 20 years, the Rebbe's mother-in-law, the Rebbe's Nechamadina, used to make a meal for Yom Tif. That means Rosh Hashanah, Motzei Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos. And the Rebbe used to come to all. She would host a meal, and there would be a minyan by the table who she would feed. And the Rebbe's Zalman and our Rebbe would come and sit in the same place he had sat, B'chaim Chiyosei Baal Madena, the Friedrich Rebbe, on the left side, and so on. And during these meals, the Rebbe sat with great derech. The Rebbe would behave as if the Friedrich Rebbe was sitting physically next to him. But if people would ask him questions, he would answer. So somebody said to him once on Shvi'ah Shel Pesach, that it says in the Sichos, the Friedrich Rebbe said that Shvi'ah Shel Pesach is the greatest simcha of the whole year. The happiest day of the year, Shvi'ah Shel Pesach. If you look at Maamar Mekutei Torah, he also brings out this idea of L'Hashem Elokecha. Shvi'ah Shel Pesach is like Shabbos, like Yom Kippur. It's a very holy day. So this Chassid asked the Rebbe that when the Friedrich Rebbe sat by the table Shvi'ah Shel Pesach, nobody saw any special simcha. What does it mean that the greatest simcha is Shvi'ah Shel Pesach? So the Rebbe answered him, Minei Ubei. The Rebbe told him, you were by the Friedrich Rebbe, so you witnessed it. You saw the simcha of the Rebbe Shvi'ah Shel Pesach. So this Chassid says to the Rebbe, that's exactly why I'm asking, because I didn't see it. So the Rebbe said, so if you didn't see it, what do you want from me? And the Rebbe, on Shabbos you experience how the Yisraelim is. On Shabbos you see how the worlds are in a godly state. On Shabbos you see how food is also holy, and drink is also holy, and sleep is also holy. In other words, as mezet nicht is nicht das Simen asenita. If you don't see the Rebbe Rashab's famous word, at the Balagol tracht, the fair tracht haben, and the Balagol tracht wegen ein bisschen brampfen, werde die Chachamim nicht eis Chachamim. Which means to say that if you have people who are on a lower level, who are not sensitive to the holiness of Shabbos, it doesn't diminish what Shabbos is. The Rebbe told them, you don't experience Shabbos, you don't experience Shvi'ah Shel Pesach, it doesn't mean it's not happening, it means you're not privy to it. So there's a concept of Aliyas Ha'elamis, Pnimiyas Ha'elamis, and Chitzeniyas Ha'elamis. There's only something called Chitzeniyas, Shabbat Chitzeniyas Ha'elamis, where the Aliyah doesn't occur, which is why we experience the world in the same state. But by Tzaddikim, on Shabbos, there's Aliyas Ha'elamis. There's a story with the Rebbe's father, Adidya Tzeltman. I don't know if I heard it, that the Rebbe was once walking along the Dnieper. Right? He was a Rav in Yekaterinslav, which is now called Dnieper Petrovsk, because of the Dnieper River, the Dnip. It's a large river in Russia. Pardon me, in the Ukraine. So he was walking with some Bachrim, Chassidishe Bachrim, and they asked him this question: what does it mean when it says in Kabbalah that on Shabbos the world has Aliyas Ha'elamis? So Rabbi Leivik leaned over and listened to the waves of the Dnieper, and he said, "Herst es chvalet sechandish." You hear? The waves are different. The waves are different. Now Rabbi Leivik obviously was sensitive to Shabbos. Rabbi Leivik had the Givin Alakus, the Rebbe's father. But the chassid with whom he was walking did not hear as sechandish gechvalet. He had to believe him. You hear it's a different chvalet. It's chvalet sechandish. Taked is a story, as I'm talking, I'm remembering, from the same Heilige Ruzhin Rebbe, that when he was a little boy, and he went to Cheder, and they learned the Gemara, Masechta Shabbos, Hashecheach Mosai Shabbos. Somebody forgets when Shabbos is. It's talking about a Yetze B'Shayara. You go out in a caravan, you go out into a desert, you can be gone in 15 days, 20 days, and you just walk through the sand and you can get confused. So there's all kinds of Shabbos. If you forget what day Shabbos, how do you make Parnasa? You're not allowed to work on Shabbos. But if you don't know what day Shabbos is, you can't work any day. If you can't work any day, you're going to starve. So what are you supposed to do? So the Fashidin Halachas are supposed to make up Parnasa. A whole situation. So the Ruzhin Rebbe learned his Gemara with his Melamed, and he raised his hand and he says, Rebbe, how could a person forget when Shabbos is? So Melamed explained to him, what's meant a Yetze B'Shayara? You go out in a caravan, you're lost in the desert. And the Ruzhin says that he doesn't understand how can you forget when Shabbos is. So the Melamed explained it again, and the Melamed was getting very upset. He said, Yisrolik, but it's the Chazak Kluger. Yisrolik, you always ask such good questions. Why are you acting so silly? Why don't you understand it? So the Ruzhin Rebbe was a very little boy. He says, Rebbe, Shabbos is the Himmel anandere. How could you forget when it's Shabbos? The sky is different. He physically would see a different heaven on Shabbos and during the week. No, if you see a different heaven on Shabbos during the week, and you're B'Shayara, you also know when it's Shabbos. So tzaddikim experienced the Aliyas Ha'elamis of Shabbos. And finally, there's a story. Also, I don't know the source. It was a certain Chassidishe Rebbe, a Polish Rebbe, who in his shul had an Aron Kodesh, an ark designed, and the Aron Kodesh was designed in such a way that on either side of the Aron there was a overhang. On one side of the Aron stood the Rebbe, the Chassidishe Rebbe, and on the other side of the Aron stood the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, by shtenders. Each one had a shtender, and there was an overhang. During the week, that Chassidishe Rebbe used to fit underneath this overhang, and on Shabbos he physically didn't fit. In other words, he was physically larger on Shabbos, physically bigger, taller. His clothing would tailor during the week, obviously. Somehow they fit him on Shabbos, but he was pushed physically a bigger person. This is the pshat, that by the biggest tzaddikim, Shabbos is a physically different environment, a different world. You and I believe that this is emes, the kedushas of Shabbos, the tainug of Shabbos, the godliness of Shabbos. And by the biggest tzaddikim, it was bepashtas agili. They experienced Shabbos, the godliness of Shabbos bepashtas. So we're going to be learning a Maamar, which is going to give us the standard, the classic, the standard insight into Shabbos. And again, I suspect that over the course of the years that we've been learning, we've come across Shabbos before, but when you come across Shabbos again, you fabring about Shabbos again. And after we learn about Shabbos, we're going to contrast Shabbos with Manna, which is, of course, the topic of this Maamar. Remember, 2 weeks ago we talked about food, and last week talked about Lechem and Hashamayim, food which comes from heaven. That's the difference in the first bracha of Birchas Hamazon. Pardon me, the second bracha of Birchas Hamazon. The first bracha of Birchas Hamazon just mentions Mazin. I'm sorry. And the second bracha of Birchas Hamazon mentions Al ha'aretz v'al hamazon, the earth, the land, and the food, because this is Lechem and Hashamayim, this is Lechem and Haaretz. And the big question of the Maamar was, how come on Shabbos there's no Manna? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's get to the Maamar. We're on line 137. It Says the Heilige Rebbe v'achash in his Baya Kol now, with all the information we have about the weekdays, and the weekdays has to do with birur. And birur means that the Eibishter brings food into this world, it needs to be corrected in every aspect. It needs to be corrected in how it grows, it needs to be corrected in how it's prepared, that means cooked and so on, and it needs to be corrected in how it's digested. And then there's a higher madrega of food, which is called man, which requires no preparation, not the way it grows, not the way it's prepared, and not the way it's digested. It's nivla beivorim, it's not digested, there is no waste, it goes straight into the body, straight into the limbs, it's like eating minerals, not like eating regular food. And this I'm adding now, the difference between the food and the man is the food is a weekday Inyan. Why is the food a weekday Inyan? Because the weekday has to do with birurim. The weekday has to do with separating good from evil, disentangling entanglements or confusions of teiv and ra, and food is an entanglement of good and evil. And when you process it, both when it grows and when you prepare it, as well as when you digest it, the good is uplifted and the evil is disposed of. So regular food is a weekday phenomenon, has to do with the weekdays. Man should be a Shabbos dika food. Why should man be a Shabbos dika food? Man should be a Shabbos dika food because Shabbos is higher than birurim. Shabbos is beidir also, and everything is godliness. And man is a food that requires no birur. Moreover, it says in Chazal, I think Rashi even brings it in Chumash, Vayevorech, Vayekadesh, Borchei b'man and Kitche b'man. It's brought Maamar Chassidishe based on the Gemara that the bracha of man and the kedusha of man came from Shabbos. And what's the irony? A whole week we have man, and we have man a whole week because it's a Shabbos dika food. This is discussed at incredible length in the second chelik of the Hebsh Chaim Beis, that a whole week in the desert they had man, which is godly food, Lechem abidim, the food of the malachim, from Shabbos. Shabbos is above beidir. Shabbos is above entanglement and therefore need for disentanglement. It's clear, like we discussed last week, Chochmas Tima, which comes from the Gvoros of Atika Kadisha, and Butzina, what's it called? Tala de Bedulcha. And there's another expression that I'm forgetting, Butzina de Kardonis, I believe, which is a very deep madrega in Atzmas of Elokus, where everything emerges perfect. No need to be corrected. And yet the man, which is a Shabbos dika food, that in the desert the Jewish people had a whole week, didn't come down on Shabbos. And the question is, if Shabbos is the day which is above beidir, and man is a food which is above birur, how is it that even though man is provided for by the brocha and the kedusha of Shabbos, on Shabbos itself there is no man? So the Rebbe says, "V'achash in his Barakol now that we set up today's shiur with the last two shiurim, we talked about the weekday food and birurim, and Shabbos dika food, which is above birurim, and we observed that the Shabbos dika food, which is above birurim, Yidden had during the week in the midbar, and they didn't get Shabbos." Says the Rebbe, Inyan Shabbos. We'll explain Shabbos, and when we explain Shabbos, we'll be able to go back and revisit the question of the month. So the Rebbe says on line 138, the pasuk says, Kisheishes Yamim also of a gamer for 6 days the Eibishter created the world on a level which is called action. And like I mentioned to you earlier by the Eibishter, the Burish HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chashiv Maaseh, action by Hashem Yisbarach means speech. So the Eibishter creates the world through action, which means speech. Pardon me. On the 7th day the Eibishter rested. And the other pasuk says, V'yishbeis b'yem hashvi v'kemer. Pardon me, the Eibishter rests on the 7th day, which means not that the world ceases to be created. Because if the Eibishter would cease to create the world would disappear, but rather he's not creating it on a level of Yerida and Asiyah, he's creating it on a level of Machshava and Aliyah. And he explains it, Einyan sheishes yom, the concept of the 6 days, and that the 6 days have to do with creation. On a level of Asiyah, says the Rebbe, each of the 6 days is one of the 6 emotional attributes in the godly realm, which is Atzilus. The small face, how godliness is reduced to Hishtalshalus, which is the 6 midas of Atzilus. Each day, this is a special energy brought forward from the midas of Zad Atzilus. The Atzilus, but it passes through Malchus of Atzilus. And of course, Malchus is the mouth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Peh. So although the 6 midas of Atzilus are providing a godly energy, on Sunday it's Chesed, and on Monday it's Gevurah, Tuesday it's Tiferes, and so on, but because it's passing through Malchus, and Malchus is Dibur, the Midah is qualified by words, which is considered Asiyah by the Eibishter. Sunday is the attribute of Chesed, the Monday is the attribute of Gevurah. And by the way, you have a lot of this in Sharichas V'Amunah Perek Yadalef. The Alter Rebbe talks about this as well. Let's say that his Havos B'yam on line 141 now, for the purpose of creating the lower worlds, B'ri Yetzir and Asiyah, that are called B'Bal Gevul. That's how you read this. In a way that they should be limited. The air and the light. Pardon me. Mishtal shall go through a series of steps called a chain. B'tzimtzumim, by being reduced again and again, from cause after cause, of one vessel and a second vessel, of all different types. There should be a world which is absolutely limited betachlis. The will of Atzilus is, the will of Ein Sof is, the Hashem should have a home for himself in the lowest world. No, if Hashem is going to have a home for himself in the lowest world, he needs a lowest world. And if you can have a lowest world, you have to have Tzimtzum. So the Rebbe says, to understand the process of creation, which is called before Asiyah, and called before Sheishes Yamim Masa, because although it's created from the 6 midas of Atzilus, they pass through Malchus of Atzilus, which is an Inyan of Dibur. So he gives you an example. And it's interessant, there's so many different examples that Chassidus brings. This is a little bit different than the one that's normally brought. Somebody has a very deep concept and he wants to write it down. The intellectual richness from the way he understands that deep idea in his mind. Tzarech leided must descend. And go through a series of steps of the chain. Derech tzimtzumim rabim through various contractions. Derech chochma, ubina, u'michochma bina lemides, v'chulu ad keach ha'asiyah, until it comes down to the level of action. Shebayad, in a person's hand, hamugbelas be'esias aksav, which is limited in words that are written. Now understand what's unique about this mashal. Normally we talk about creation, we give a mashal of spoken words. Spoken words are dibur. Here the Alter Rebbe gives a mashal of written words. And written words are asiyah, which is of course fascinating. Because like I said, throughout Chassidus, when they talk about creation and Shabbos, they speak about Hashem speaking and ceasing to speak. And we bring the Maamar Chazal that I mentioned twice before. The Buddha Shalakadosh Baruch Hu Choshev Ma'aseh. It's a level of Hashem's speech, which is like an action. Here the Alter Rebbe insists on giving a mashal from Ke'ech Asiyah. Writing, which is an even action. But what the Alter Rebbe wants by bringing this particular mashal, I don't know. But on the Nimshal, it's certainly still the same. That this Eisis Aksav is considered the Buddha Shalakadosh Baruch Hu Choshev Ma'aseh. So you have an idea, and you write it down. When you write the idea down in the written word, the idea which comes from your mind and your soul is found on paper. But your paper is only able to deliver, and your hand is only able to write down this of the idea that's writable. And you probably know the expression which Chassidus brings from a Gemara, Tavna Deliba Lekasve Inch. Every idea has a light, has a spiritual aspect, has an enlightenment aspect, which cannot be written down, cannot be said. And the piece of paper and the ink and the pen are going to deliver the idea in as much as the idea is deliverable, but a very, very special, spiritual aspect of the idea, which is above words, is lost. That's it. That's the mashal. Line 146, we see that you finish working, you stop working, so you stop bringing forward the idea from its more abstract form, its more enlightened form to the written form, and so the light of the neshama and the faculties of the neshama, which brought forward through this chain of steps. Through this cause and effect principles. They have an ascent. They should be included in the level of ideas, as they exist in the intellectual faculty, as it is in the neshama, and in the neshama itself. Pardon me. So, while you're writing, you're bringing forward the idea, and in bringing it forward, you're reducing it. When you cease to write, it goes back into your brain and into your neshama, and now the idea has the richness that it had before. So the Rebbe says in line 48, the same is the difference between the 6 days of the week. When Hashem brings forward the world on a level which is called Asiyah, which is Dibur, through a chain reaction of steps, cause and effect. Myriads and myriads of steps. Till it produces the world which is lowly and physical, the one that we know, which is the lowest level in its step, in its level. So during the week, there's a phenomenon of Hashem speaking. And according to this Maamar, there's a phenomenon of Hashem writing. And as a consequence, there is a world where the godliness has been so reduced that it can come out and, so to speak, become separated from Him, at least in its own perception, on a level which is equal to speech or to written words. And on the seventh day He rests. In other words, the lights of creation that were invested in the Dibur and in the Ksav ascend, and they become re-included in the power, which is the all-encompassing power, which is where all of creation is one unified entity, which we call thought. And of course, when Hashem ceases to speak and to write, and His spoken words or His written words are really included in the Keach Klali, the world is raised up into that level and does not disappear. And then in that level, high and low are the same. Because Keach Klali, Pashut, it's a simple faculty. It's an encompassing faculty. It's Keach Klali, which is plain. B'tachas apshit, it's the highest level of plainness. Which means to say that all of creation is enveloped by one light, which is called Makiv, which is equal to everything. And he compares it to the Madrega of Adam Kadman. Hashem looks forward and He sees all of time in one point, and He explains Shesev of a Makiv called Pratei HaIshtalshalos. He envelops all the details of Ishtalshalos, and they're part of His klal, betachles ha'iskalos, the highest level of klalos, of integration that one is. Like, for example, a person is aware of himself, not by touching himself, not by looking at himself, but just by seeing himself through his mind, of all the specifics of his limbs, from his head to his feet in one glance. So there's a level where all of Ishtalshalos is one glance, and it's the Madrega of Adam Kadman. And by contrast, you'll recall last week, when we talked about Mon has to do with the Madrega called Akudim. Now, I'm not sure exactly how we're going to separate the idea that Shabbos is connected to Adam Kadman and Mon is connected to Akudim, but clearly the Alter Rebbe's point is to draw a separation, a distinction between the holiness of Shabbos and the upliftedness of the worlds on Shabbos and the level of godliness from which the Mon comes forward. Inyan Shabbos, which is the concept of Shabbos. Kivei Shavas, that Hashem rests, explains the Alter Rebbe, Hu Ali as is all of the worlds ascend, Bebechin as Pnimius, onto a deeper level. V'nechlal, when they become included Bekeach Klali in a general faculty, general tool, HaPoshet, which is plain. B'tachas ha'eskalas, the highest level of human of integration, of interconnectedness. Now, Rabbi, I have a problem. My problem is that I'm teaching you a Maamar that I don't understand, which is really pathetic. But I'll tell you what I think. And of course, my point is, what I think is, I don't know it. I'm not certain that what I'm teaching you is correct. This is how I understand it. There is a wonderful mashal from the Mittler Rebbe. I never learned it in the Mittler Rebbe. I learned it from the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab writes, it's a mashal from the Rebbe Mittler Rebbe, mashal mechuvim b'yos. It's a wonderful mashal. Where the Mittler Rebbe talks about ideas emerging from the subconscious of a person. To use the classic example that Chassidus gives, the example of building a home. Why is building a home the classic example that Chassidus gives? Because building a home is a mashal for the Eibishter having a home. So the middle Rebbe observes, a person suddenly finds in his consciousness a home. The first time an idea to have himself his own house emerges to his consciousness. We cannot call this a will. We cannot call this a thought. We could call this a fantasy. That's what it is. The neshama suggested to him to have a house. Never thought about it before. No premonition. What happens? He forgets about it. Now, very frequently people have fantasies and they never think about them again. What happens if this person revisits that fantasy a second time? The second time is very, very different than the first time. Because the first time that fantasy entered into his awareness, he had no plans to think it. It just came. The neshama itself delivered this thought to him. But when he thinks about it the second time, he's deliberately choosing to revisit a thought that came to him without any premeditation, without any planning. And certainly if he thinks it a third time and a fourth time, and of course each time you think it again, you think about it more practically until you actually go ahead and make it. So Chassidus explains that the difference between the very first time that the idea enters into your mind, and the second time it enters into your mind, and the third time it enters into your mind, and so on is this. The first time your consciousness thinks of a home, that house is an expression of your neshama. Your infinite soul produced for you an image of a home. Every later time you're going to revisit that home, it's not about your soul, it's about a home. The neshama gave you a house in its fantasy, in its imagination. The very first time you think about that home is a piece of your neshama. Every later time, it's a home that you're thinking about specifically based on the first time, based on the first fantasy. And two Hebrew words are introduced to represent these two levels. The first time you think about that house is called the Ratzon Pashat, a simple will, a plain will. The second time you think about that home is called the Ratzon Klali, a general will. And Chassidus points out, Ein Bechlal Ela Masha Befrat. When you think about it the second time, all of the house is one point. But because now you're choosing to think about it, you're choosing to think about it in a practical way. And the moment you think about it in a practical way, even if you're thinking about it in a practical way, only in general, you have a shayches, your relationship with the details already. So the first time is Ratzon Pashat, and the second time is Ratzon Klal. Now notice the Alter Rebbe himself seems to be a bit perplexed. He says, Keach Klali and Pashat. You see, he said that twice. Line 151 also says, Keach Klali and Pashat. Now, I personally believe that the reason the Alter Rebbe says both words, Keach Klali and Pashat, is because only Lifnei HaTzimtzum do you have real pshitas. In other words, there's three levels. Lifnei HaTzimtzum is Ratzon Pashat. Akudim, which is last week's conversation about Mon, is Ratzon Klali. And Ak is Klali Pashat. Ak is a world where the Chitzonius Ak is a Klal and the Pnimius Ak is Pshitus, and the two levels are together. And the Alter Rebbe is saying both words because the Chitzonius of Ak may be a Klal, but because of the proximity of Chitzonius Ak to Pnimius Ak, it's Pshitus, who uses both Lashonos Keach Klali and Pashat. And for those of you who are familiar with the Mesholim about Esesfiras HaGenuzos, the Maamar Shvuas Samaches, you know that the mashal for Ak is Shem or Shemes, names, and the mashal for Akudim is Keches Atzmiyim, and the mashal for Nekudim is Keches Ne'elamo, and the mashal for Atzilus is Keches Geluyim. So Atzilus and Nekudim and Akudim all have Kelim on the level of Prat and Klal and Etzem, and in Ak it's Shem. Shem is the Pshitas of the Neshama, which is what the Dreg of Yecheles, or Noise as it's called in Chassidus, as opposed to Kodel. I don't mean to bomb you, I don't mean to stam haka chainik, but actually in the footnote, if you look in 165, 66, 67, and 68, which I'm not going to be learning with you. This is a Hagah from the Maril, ironically. He says what I just said, that the difference in the two levels that are being discussed here is different in the levels of Noisei and Koilo. In other words, Yechelis and Keach, which is the difference between Akan and Akudim. Okay, Atkan, overwhelm, if you will, as a noun. The point is, you need to understand that the Alter Rebbe is explaining Shabbos. And on Shabbos, the worlds ascend to their source. And the source to which the world ascend is called Kloli Pashut. Mon is a Shabbosdik food. But Mon does not relate to the level of Kloli Pashut. Mon relates to the level of Kloli that's not Pashut. In other words, Mon is the world of Akudim, where all 10 vessels are made into one. But on the level of Mon, you say you have many details that are bittled by a higher light. As opposed to an Ak, you have many details that not only bittled by a higher light, they're made into light. And when they're made into light, they're literally one. In other words, Mon is part of Shabbos, but it's lower than Shabbos itself. Shabbos is Pshitus, how the worlds ascend to a level where everything is one with godliness. And Mon is a level of Klolos, where the worlds ascend to a level where they're bittled by godliness, but there's a difference between saying they're bittled by godliness and that they're godliness itself. Now, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more soon, but let's keep going. 156. Now, remember the question. The question is, Mon is a Shabbosdik food. Mon is a food that has no birur. It's a Shabbosdik food. Barchei b'mon and kitchei b'mon. And nevertheless, on Shabbos itself, there is no mon. It's very ironic, very strange. So the Rebbe says, Ve'ikir ha'hefresh ben Shabbos l'mon. Mon is a Shabbosdik food, but there's a very, very big difference between the food of Shabbos and the Shabbos itself. What's the difference? Ki b'mon, because even though Mon is Shabbosdik, in other words, Mon comes from the level of godliness, Chachmas Timo, and Tal de Bedulcha, and Gevurah Latika Chassidishe, and everything is Mevurer. Pardon me. Hi mebechinas makeir hashayach leishtalshlus. It's a source which has an indirect relationship with Ishtalshalus, k'mei bechinas akudim, like the level which is called akudim. What's akudim? 10 vessels that are made into one, not into zero. One is klal. Ak is 10 vessels made into zero, and 0 is klal poshet, as he said before. She'akod bekli echad, all of Ishtalshalus is reduced to one vessel. Sheyesh bei mikol protei ha'ishtalshalus, you have within akudim, from all the specifics of Ishtalshalus, ha'cheil bebechinas eskal is all integrated into a oneness, because the light bittles their separation. Ve'efen bechinas eskal alusei, and the form of its integration and interconnectedness, asher nichlolim bei, that in the level of akudim is included, kol protei protem shebehishtalshalus, all the specifics and details of Ishtalshalus, into a oneness, is because there's a light that's bittling it. However, the light which is bittling it, the light which is causing the bittel and the details of Ishtalshalus to become akudim has a relationship with Ishtalshalus. Although it's higher than Ishtalshalus, it has an indirect relationship with Ishtalshalus itself. It's the beginning of their source, like it says in Chassidishe and Kabbalah, that the beginning of Atzilus is akudim. Accordingly, the revelation of akudim is the waderech es klal. And here you see the word klal without the word pshitas. You see, klal means the whole universe, the whole creation is unified at one point. But that point is a point where all of the aspects exist individually as they're bittled by a higher light. Asher shayech lahapratim asher nichlolim bei, has a relationship with the details which are included in it. So Mon comes from a very high level of godliness. How high a level of godliness is it? Hashem shines such a high madreg of oyer that all of the details of creation become one in that oyer, but they don't become the oyer itself. They become bottled in the oyer. Says that Aval bechinas Shabbos as opposed to Shabbos. The worlds are elevated to an even higher level. Lebechin is a makif akloli, to a higher level of makif. Lebechin is atzmos ein sof, to the level ein sof which is called atzmos. You can't even say about this level of godliness, shu makeir uklau. You can't even call it a source. And a general rule, hashayech leishtalshus, which is any kind of direction with the worlds, mitat shebechines ein sof. And again, the word that I'm employing to draw the distinction is that the godliness of Shabbos is pshitos. In other words, how the world is godliness itself, and the godliness of Mon is his scalalos, which means to say that it's nullified by a godly light. And when you reach a level of Ein Sof, it's not only how all the worlds are one, how you're altogether beyond the world, and from this pshitas, the light, come other worlds as well. Accordingly, when Shabbos comes, and the godliness of Shabbos is revealed in the world, what you're seeing is shenigla. There's a revelation of ha'oras mekeir ha'kloli, a revelation of a source. And notice again, he uses the same words again, ha'kloli ha'poshet. It's a general, but it's also pshitas, betachas ha'pshitas, and that's the godliness of Shabbos. As opposed to Mon. Line 169, umitam zela yorad man b'Shabbos. Shabbos, Mon, is a part of Shabbos, but Mon is a part of Shabbos which has a connection to the weekdays. And because Mon is a part of Shabbos, which has a connection to the weekdays, although Shabbos is what blesses Mon, and Shabbos is what halifies Mon, on Shabbos itself there is no food. Now, so what happens on Shabbos? You end up eating regular food. Because you can't eat the Mon on Shabbos, which of course doesn't make any sense. And we can debate this, and we can talk about this, and we can explain this. But the underlying point is you cannot have Manna on Shabbos because Shabbos is higher than food altogether. Even than food on the level of Manna. Key, I'm on line 170. Man comes from a level of integration and unity, which is akudim, which means to say the whole of creation is on a level of klal. We discussed in last week's shiur. If you remember, last week I gave you a long introduction about the idea of three different types of hiskalos. Hiskalos mitzad oyer, hiskalos mitzad chalishos, and hiskalos mitzad meliyashim mitzad reish v'seif. And I also told you last week that the hiskalos of akudim described here is very similar to hiskalos mitzad oyer, but it's more than it. It's transforming. The hiskalos of Shabbos is higher. The hiskalos of Shabbos is really the third madrega meliyashim mitzad reish v'seif. Akudim has some relationship with Ishtalshalos. And if it has some relationship with Ishtalshalos, and on Shabbos the worlds are higher than Ishtalshalos, there can be no Mon. You could say about Akudim, that at least one vessel exists, is not nothing. Has an indirect relationship with Ishtalshalos. Anything which has to do with Ishtalshalos, is relatively speaking a detail compared to a general rule. While Shabbos itself, the worlds ascend to a level of a light, which is not only reducing it to a cloud, but it's raising it up into a pshitas, it becomes godliness itself. There's literally no details, not even details at the level of integrated oneness. There's just the oneness itself. And includes everything in absolute oneness. Accordingly, Hamon, which is a Shabbos deka food, and it comes from the level of unity of Shabbos, but on Shabbos itself it cannot come down. It cannot come down on Shabbos, because even though it's a Shabbos deka food, but it's a Shabbos deka food which is the shaychus to the world. And since on Shabbos the world is higher than a shaychus to the world, even the Shabbos, the food of man, cannot come down. Because it has a connection to the world in an indirect way. It's a fascinating interpretation. And if I was honest with you, I would tell you, now that I taught it to you, I understand it as well as I did before I taught it to you. But I'm not going to be honest with you, so I won't say that. Okay? Make believe you didn't hear what I just said. That was just thinking out loud. There's a Maamar in Samach Vov. which talks about the question of pshitus. Pshitus literally means plainness, simplicity. Pshitus means there's only one. There's not unity, there's one. Not many things that are integrated, but one. And the Rebbe Rashab writes, "This Maamar ein lanu hasaga b'inyan pshitus." We can't understand pshitus. He said, we can't understand it. Then you turn the page. This is the old Samach Vos. The new Samach Vos, I don't remember how the pages are laid out. And you have a long parenthesis where the Rebbe Rashab says, you know, there's no mashal for pshitus. But maybe, maybe we could say this mashal. And he brings the mashal from a painting. What is a painting? A painting is full of details. Paintings have different colors. Paintings have hills and valleys and trees and grass and a home and a yard and a picket fence and flowers and people. When you look at a painting, you don't see any of those things. You just see a living image. You see oneness. In that painting, there's various details, but your first re'iyah response, your first visual reaction, or your first reaction to visually encountering this painting is you see oneness. So the Rebbe Rashab says, if you want a mashal for pshitus, it's a mashal for a piece of art where you, even though there's so many details, you don't see details, you see only the artist. When someone draws a picture, and there's many details in it, there is an image in the artist's head which is communicating a certain message. The details are different or disparate, but the message is one. And when you look at the piece of art, the first thing you see is that message, the pshitus. Shabbos is pshitus. What does that mean? There's a world. And the world is full of details. On Shabbos, the details of the world reflect the artist, which is the Eibishter, which is godliness. Now, Mon is also pshitus. But Mon is different. Mon is where there's many different details, and they're integrated because of a higher light, which bittles them. But when the higher light bittles them, you don't see the details at all. In other words, you don't see how the details are one, you don't see details. And ironically, and this is actually logical if you think about it, when you see how the details are one, that's a greater unity than when you don't see the details because of the unity. When you don't see the details because of the unity, that means there's either one or many, it can't be both. When you see the oneness in the details themselves are one. And that's the difference between the Hiskalas, and the Hiskalas from light. So the level of Shabbos creates a unity in a world of diversity where you see God. You see the unifier, and every aspect is reflecting that godliness. The Mon, on the other hand, is you don't see the details because the light breaks the details. Which means to say, ironically, that the details which are broken by the light of Akudim is more mitzias than the details which you observe as part of a oneness, which is reflecting the Eibishter, the Beirei Elam, the Yetzirah Elam. So it is true, we're not stepping away from that Mon is a Shabbos-dika food. But Manna is a Shabbos-dika food that is lower than Shabbos itself. It's overwhelmed by the experience of Shabbos. So on Shabbos it can't come down. During the week, when the transcendent level of Shabbos, the Pshitas level of Shabbos is removed, so in Yidden, we're in the desert, they can have Mun. So there's a great irony here. Shabbos blesses the week when it comes to Mun, and yet Mun couldn't be except during the week. So now we're on line 176, and we go back to the very, very first point in the Maamar. You may recall that the first couple lines of this Maamar were about Lechem Mishneh, about 2 loaves of bread. And from the 2 loaves of bread, we moved on to Man, and we moved on to Lechem and Haaretz and Lechem and Hashamayim. Says the Rebbe, move on Inyan to Lechem Shabbos. Shabbos is supposed to have Lechem Mishneh, 2 loaves. And Shapinigo tzarech l'nech zu al gabi zu. Api halacha, the right one has to be a little bit higher than the left one. Because when Nigla sees Shabbos, it sees the details of Shabbos. And since it sees the details of Shabbos, Shabbos is a higher level. It's Bechinas Eir Yasher to direct light. You put one on top of the other, made it indicates on the idea that on Shabbos there's a greater revelation, but a revelation within the chain of worlds, conforming to the limitation of cause and effect. You know what I'm thinking? This is like I don't know for sure, but I'm going to suggest it. Like neshama yeseda. You know, Shabbos you get an neshama yeseda. So some people simplistically imagine that you get another battery pack. You know, you get another neshama. You have another place to plug in, and you plug in an extra battery, which of course is foolish. On Shabbos, what's neshama yeseda? On Shabbos, neshama yeseda means you have access to more of what your neshama is. You have a neshama which is called nefesh, or ruach, or neshama. And higher than that, there's something called neshama lin neshama, the soul of the soul, or chaya and yechida. And the chaya and yechida, the neshama lin neshama, is hidden. On Shabbos, what you are is enhanced by your higher neshama. So when what you are is enhanced by your neshama, you have two neshamas. Your regular neshama, how it's enhanced by higher neshama, which means to say it's one on top of the next. One on top of the next means the lower level of neshama remains what it was, but it's inspired by the higher level of the neshama. So the Rebbe says that's how you understand the way you arrange the chalas in Lechem Mishneh al pi nigla. However, ubechinas nisted, on a Kabbalah level, where you appreciate that Shabbos is not only a higher level being added to a lower level, but where things are raised up into such a state of height that you can't even call them klal, you can only call them pshitos, and every detail is reflecting the pshitos of Elokus, hu bechinas er chezer. The godliness of Shabbos is not godliness that is being brought down, but it's how the world is included in godliness itself. Aliyes edis, how the lights of creation are ascended. Liyes eilas v'nechlalos, to be uplifted and included. B'tachas ha'eskalalos, and the ultimate integration, b'chinas makef ha'kloli kanal, with the ultimate makef, which we call pshitos, as we said before. And now he concludes, mitatam zeh, on this level, tzarich, it's necessary, the way you hold the chalas. You take the two chalas, remember the Rebbe did it many times. You would take one challah, hold it on the right hand, the other challah, hold it, then put it together so that the backs of the chalas are touching and they're side by side, exactly the same. One is not higher than the next. Why? Because one is higher than the next means to say there's two levels. Side by side means that the light which is shining makes them precisely the same because it's pshitas. Shemaidim, which indicates abachinas eskalas hamiti, ultimate integration, but makif elim at a higher level of makif. Shemakif lecho pirte prati ishtalshos, which embraces, envelops all the details of ishtalshos on a level which is called b'shava equal. That kamei in presence of Shabbos, mailo mata shabbat v'chuli v'dal. The highest levels, the lowest levels are one, and there's no separations. If you see that footnote, which I'm of course not going to read, he talks about zocher v'shamir, and he says the two loaves of Shabbos are zocher and shamir. And Zocher is higher than Shamir, but from the Madreg of higher than Ishtalshalus, their Shavim became also. There's no separation between Zocher and Shamir, which comes to Madreg of Atika Kedish, from the level of Ak, from the level of Pshitas, which is what the Maamar is trying to say.